United States and India do not have a trade deal since Donald Trump took office. Donald Trump right now imposed a 25% tariff on India and is threatening that he's going to increase the tariff rate up to 100% if India does not stop buying Russian oil. On one side, it makes sense. Why are you still buying Russian oil when we have a crisis? On the other side, it doesn't make sense because it's going to hurt the United States in the first place. If you look at the oil market, you will see that Russian oil cannot possibly be replaced whether you like that or not. United States is still the largest producer of oil in the world. There is no question about it. But there isn't a huge difference between the second and the third. And right now, there isn't anybody that can replace the Russian oil. If you think that they can replace it with American oil, then you are making a grave mistake. United States oil producing capacity is working at its full capacity. And even if the world wanted to buy more American oil, they cannot do that because the United States cannot produce more oil. And nobody is going to invest in new oil infrastructure. You know, it's not easy to build those infrastructure. You cannot possibly just increase your production. You have to first invest billions of dollars to build them. It will take you years to build them. That is the first problem. Secondly, you are going to raise your prices to pay off for that facility. And then thirdly, who's going to do that when the era of oil is over and we are going on a downward trajectory? Because clean energy is rising and the future is going to be with clean energy. So not a single oil company, including ExxonMobil and every single American oil company, is not going to risk doing that. They will simply continue producing what they are producing. And that's why when the conflict happened, you will see that oil prices shot to the roof. They doubled in a matter of 3 months. By 30th of May, oil prices were already trading at about $120, while before that, they were about $60. And that directly impacts the United States because the entire global oil market is one giant market. Oil prices in the US or gas prices in the US have doubled in a matter of a couple of months from $2 per gallon to about $4. So if you're going to remove the entire oil, the Russian oil from the market, it will come back and oil prices will rise again. So they came up with a brilliant solution to fix this problem. If we cannot possibly directly buy Russian oil, let Russia sell its oil to India. India will take that oil, will refine it, and will sell it in the open market, and everybody simply can buy it from India. It's no longer a Russian oil. Now it's an Indian oil. Problem solved. Russian oil will continue being sold in the open market, and that's why the world still buys it. And that's how we solve the problem. So if we remove so much oil out of the market, who is going to replace that oil? Currently, nobody can do that. Yes, you can make an argument that Middle Eastern countries such as Saudi Arabia can slightly increase the production, but they might replace 20%, 30%, and you will still have to come back and buy Russian oil. Now, the second problem with all this argument is that India is going to suffer dramatically. Now, this might not be a problem for the United States, but it's going to be a huge problem for India. India's largest trading partner is the United States. They sell about $88 billion to the United States. On the other side, they also import a lot. Not as much as they export to the US, but pretty much. You see, there isn't much that India can actually buy from the United States if you're going to be honest about it. They buy a lot of American energy, of course, but that's pretty much about it. Because what do you think Indians can buy from the US? The problem with it is not the fact that they hate the United States, but because they have a completely different economy that is far different from the United States. Look at these two graphs. These are the GDPs per capita of both countries. The average American is 30 times wealthier than the average Indian. The GDP per capita in the US is about $87,000 or $86,000, while in India it's about $2,700. What does it mean? That means that the average American is 30 times wealthier than the average Indian. So what Americans can buy, Indians cannot possibly afford. And the only reason that India has such a huge economy is simply because they have so many people. Its population is like 5 times the US population. And a combination of so many people is going to give you a $4.5 trillion GDP. But on an individual level, people are not that rich. I'm not saying that there isn't rich people in India. Please do not take my words out of the context. But you get my point, right? And that's why you cannot possibly sell all of these foods and American cars and American products in India, because the cost of labor in the US is much more expensive, and building stuff in the US is ultimately going to be much more expensive, which means that they're going to be much more expensive for the average Indian, which means that they are much more price sensitive, which means that they won't buy much from the United States to begin with. The Indian economy began to grow dramatically back 25 years ago in the year 2000. Prior to that, it was barely growing, and the country is still trying to build its basic infrastructure, that people have roads, people have bridges, people have the basic necessities. Forget about foods and cars and other stuff. I'm not saying that it's completely backwarded country, but you got to understand that it has a bright future. It has a lot of potential. If this trend is going to continue, they will become one of the largest economies in the world in 30 to 40 years from now. But we are not there yet. We are still in 2025. And that's why India has a lot of high tariffs. They're trying to protect their industries since they haven't developed their industries. India began growing its economy 25 years ago. United States did that 250 years ago. And that's why the US economy is the largest economy. And because India is afraid that because they are so immature, their industry is immature, they will easily be beaten by the competition. That's why they have these huge tariffs. And that's why World Trade Organization actually allows poorer nations to have high tariffs until they bring their economies to the level where they can compete internationally. So India is actually following the World Trade Organization. India cannot also invest in the United States as much as Japan does. Japan is one of the world's largest and wealthiest economies in the world. So unlike those countries, they cannot come to the United States and say, oh, we're going to invest $700 billion in the United States. They don't have that option. They are not that rich to do something like that. So they cannot buy their tariff rate down like the EU did or Japan did. That's a completely different question, whether they'll invest that or not, but nonetheless. But another thing I want you to realize based on this is that if oil prices rise dramatically or double in a matter of few months, and they are going to have a serious impact on the average American, think about what it's going to do to the average Indian. They don't have an option to buy expensive oil. Americans have that option. It's going to hurt your pocket, but again, they have that option. Imagine how much it's going to impact the average Indian that is 30 times much poorer than the average American. United States also needs India to counter China. China is the greatest economic threat to the United States. Why? Because they have the power to compete with the United States. The only two nations, one is not a nation, it's a European Union and China. These are two who can compete with the US economically. European Union is an ally of the United States, but I would question that from now onwards based on everything that's happening. I don't think they're happy by watching how they're getting ripped off by Donald Trump and being forced to sign trade agreements that's not favorable to them. But nonetheless, on the other side, India is also an ally of the United States. But China is trying to compete with the United States. They are the second world's largest economy. They're technologically very advanced. They're dominating the world in multiple industries such as rare earth minerals, clean energy, electrical cars, and so on and so forth. And to compete and balance the power with China, United States was trying to build a close alliance with India and grow its economy so there will be a balance of economic power between these two nations in that part of the world. And India will be an ally of the United States. And by imposing a 100% tariff, you're literally destroying what you have been doing over the last 25 years to build that alliance in the first place. And that's why threatening India with a 100% tariff, first of all, it makes no economic sense for the United States in the first place. Secondly, everybody knew that they're buying Russian oil to prevent oil prices to rise dramatically. There was already an oil shock in the US back in the 1970s. It was one of the main reasons why the United States experienced stagflation back in the 1970s. They will continue buying Russian oil whether you want it or not, because every country today needs oil, especially when you have 1.5 billion people of population. And that's why I think imposing a 100% tariff on India is a complete disaster. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.